She called me sweetheart the first time we met, soft, playful, like it meant nothing. But the way her eyes lingered when she said it made me wonder if she meant everything. It started on one of those evenings that didn't feel important until afterward. My mentor had invited me to a quiet get-together at his home, just a few colleagues, simple food, and a bit of laughter to end the week. I wasn't expecting to meet her. She arrived late, calm, composed, carrying a tray of something that smelled like lemon and cinnamon. My mentor smiled, saying, "You remember my sister, right?" I didn't. But I wished I had. She was in her early 40s, maybe, with that kind of effortless poise that comes from knowing who you are. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands brushing her cheek as she laughed at something her brother said. And then her eyes found mine. "Ah," she said with a teasing smile. "You must be the polite one he keeps bragging about." I chuckled, trying to think of something smart to say, but before I could, she added, "Nice to finally meet you, sweetheart." The word caught me off guard. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't careless, either. It was warm, gentle, like she said it without even realizing the effect it might have. All evening, I caught myself listening for her voice. She had a way of talking that drew you in, light humor threaded through sincerity. When she laughed, it came from somewhere real, like she'd learned to appreciate joy in small doses. At one point, I helped her carry dishes into the kitchen. The light there was softer, golden against the edges of her hair. She reached for a glass just as I did, and our fingers brushed, just for a second. She didn't pull away immediately, she just looked up, eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "Careful," she said. "You'll make me drop something." I smiled, unsure why that simple contact felt so significant. Maybe it was the steadiness in her tone, or the kindness in her smile, like she'd seen enough of the world to know exactly what she was doing, but still found a way to make you feel seen. The night ended the way most do. People saying their goodbyes, the hum of soft music fading into silence. As I left, she called out from the doorway, voice light but unmistakably directed at me. "Drive safe, sweetheart." That word again. It lingered all the way home, replaying in my mind like a melody I couldn't forget. It should have meant nothing, just a kind woman's way of speaking. But somehow it didn't. Maybe it was the way she said it, or the warmth in her eyes when she did. Maybe it was the rare comfort of being noticed, really noticed, by someone who didn't have to. All I knew was that night changed something small, quiet, and undeniable inside me. And it all began with one simple word, sweetheart. After that night, she began appearing in the most ordinary corners of my week, never by plan, never by design. Just small coincidences that somehow started to feel like rhythm. The first time was at the café near the university, the one with soft jazz playing behind the counter. I walked in half awake, ordered my usual, and there she was at the corner table, stirring her tea as if the world moved slower for her. She looked up, surprised but not startled, and smiled. "Well, sweetheart," she said softly, "seems like we have similar taste in quiet places." That word again, sweetheart, and just like before, it slipped through me like warmth in winter. We talked for a while, about nothing in particular, the rain outside, the price of coffee, how people change when they think no one's watching. She had a way of listening that made every answer sound more interesting than it really was. When she laughed, she tilted her head slightly, her hand brushing her hair back, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I found myself wanting to keep that sound around a little longer. After that, our meetings became a pattern. Sometimes I'd see her at the market, her sleeves rolled up as she compared peaches, or walking her dog at dusk near the park. Each time, she greeted me with that same calm affection, a small smile, a light touch on the arm, a playful sweetheart that sent a quiet tremor through my chest. Once, she stopped by my table at the café with 2 cups in hand. "Coffee tastes better when shared," she said, setting one in front of me. "You're making a habit of this," I teased. "And you don't seem to mind," she replied, eyes glinting. She was right, I didn't. Our closeness didn't need explanation. It lived in small gestures, the way she fixed the collar of my shirt one morning, fingers grazing the edge of my neck. The way she lingered when saying goodbye, as if measuring the space between what was proper and what she truly felt. It wasn't romantic in the loud, movie sense. It was quieter, a growing familiarity, a pull that came from shared silence and gentle humor. And yet, beneath all that calmness, something unspoken began to hum between us. A pulse. I caught myself waiting for her messages, her greetings, her warmth. I told myself it was nothing, just kindness. But late at night, when the world grew still, I'd remember the way her hand brushed mine, how she said my name like it mattered. Affection has a way of sneaking in softly, through repetition, through comfort, through the places where laughter turns into something deeper. I didn't know what this was yet, friendship, admiration, or the start of something neither of us were ready to name. But I knew this much: every time she called me sweetheart, the world around me faded, and all I could hear was her voice, calm, steady, unforgettable. It was one of those late evenings that wrap the world in quiet. The kind of night when the air feels heavy with thoughts you haven't said out loud. I found her sitting outside after an event at her brother's place, the porch light spilling gently across her face, a half-empty glass of wine resting by her hand. The laughter from inside had faded, leaving only the faint hum of crickets and the smell of rain drifting in the air. She looked up when I stepped outside. "You escaped too?" she asked softly. I smiled. "Crowds aren't really my thing." "Mine either," she said, her gaze returning to the dark horizon. "I like it when things get quiet. You start to hear yourself think again." I sat beside her, not too close, but close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. For a while, we didn't speak. There was no need to. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It felt familiar. After a while, she sighed, not dramatically, just the kind of sigh that carries the weight of memory. "You know," she began, her tone gentle but a little tired, "people my age, we start building walls without realizing it. You stop expecting to be understood. You just get used to being strong for everyone else." I turned to her. There was something raw in her voice, something that made my chest tighten. "I don't think strength means pretending you're okay," I said quietly. She smiled faintly. "You say that now. Give it time." Her laugh was soft, but it didn't reach her eyes. She turned the wine glass in her hand slowly, watching the light catch the rim. "I've learned that affection can be dangerous when you get older. People start to question your intentions. They call it foolish, or lonely, or desperate." Her honesty left a silence between us, sharp but tender. I wanted to tell her that I didn't see her that way, that to me, she wasn't foolish or desperate, but beautifully human. Instead, I just said, "Maybe the danger isn't in feeling too much. Maybe it's in pretending you don't." She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes softened, and something unspoken passed between us, something fragile, but real. "You make it sound simple," she whispered. "It could be," I replied. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she reached out, slowly, hesitantly, and rested her hand on mine. Her touch was light, careful, as though testing whether it was allowed. "I don't usually do this," she murmured. "Let people close." "I know," I said. "That's why it matters." The air felt different after that, charged, intimate, like every second carried weight. When she finally pulled her hand back, she smiled, not the teasing smile she always wore, but something smaller, truer. "Go home, sweetheart," she said softly. "Before I start saying things I shouldn't." I didn't argue. I just nodded, heart pounding as I walked away, knowing something had shifted. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her words, and the quiet warmth of her hand still resting against mine. After that night on the porch, something between us changed, not suddenly, but in the quiet, careful way the seasons shift. We never spoke of what happened. We didn't have to. It lived beneath everything, every smile, every shared glance, every unfinished sentence. We started spending time together in ways that felt innocent on the surface. I helped her repaint her porch one weekend, and she insisted on baking for me afterward, claiming, Payment in sugar was fair. The kind of teasing that made the air around us feel lighter, though underneath it, something deeper hummed quietly. The day was warm and slow. Music played from her phone, soft old tunes that matched her taste perfectly, nostalgic and soothing. We worked side by side, and every now and then, our hands would brush as we passed the paintbrush or a cup of coffee. At one point, I noticed a streak of paint on her cheek. "You missed a spot," I said, smiling. "Where?" she asked, reaching up to wipe it. "Right there." I gestured, but before I could explain, she laughed and dipped her brush into the paint, flicking a tiny mark across my arm. "Now we're even," she said, laughing freely for the first time that day. I tried to act unimpressed, but couldn't help smiling. "You're impossible," she grinned. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Her laughter faded into a quiet moment, her eyes lingering on mine just a second too long. The world seemed to still. I felt the warmth of her gaze, the slow rhythm of her breathing, the faint scent of paint and jasmine. Without thinking, I reached up and gently brushed the streak of paint from her cheek. Her breath caught, subtle, but enough to make me realize the space between us had disappeared. For a second, either of us moved. Her hand, still holding the paintbrush, lowered slowly. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she said softly, voice trembling just slightly. "Like what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Like you mean it." Her words landed somewhere deep. I wanted to tell her that I did mean it, even if I didn't fully understand why, that every glance, every quiet moment, had started to feel like something worth protecting. But she turned away before I could answer, picking up her brush again, her tone light, trying to reset the mood. "We've got half the porch left," she said. "Let's not get sentimental yet." So we worked in silence. But the air between us had changed, charged, alive, almost tender. Every movement felt deliberate, every word carried weight. When I left that afternoon, she walked me to the gate. The sun had dipped low, turning everything gold. As I turned to leave, she touched my sleeve lightly, barely there, but enough to make me stop. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not making this feel strange." I smiled. "It doesn't feel strange at all." But it did, in the best possible way. Because for the first time, I realized how deeply I'd begun to fall, and how quietly she was falling, too. The change came quietly, the way light fades before you realize the sun has set. 1 week, everything was easy. The next, something between us had shifted again. It started with a simple comment at her brother's barbecue. We were laughing about something, probably something unimportant, when her brother looked at us with a grin and said, "You two spend a lot of time together lately." It was meant as a joke, but the way she froze told me it landed differently. She brushed it off, smiling politely, but after that, she stopped meeting my eyes. The next few days were quiet. No texts. No coffee stops. No, "Sweetheart." Just silence, a silence that pressed down harder than words ever could. I told myself she was busy, that it wasn't personal. But deep down I knew. Something had scared her, maybe what people might think, maybe what she was starting to feel. When I finally saw her again, it was by chance. She was coming out of the small bookstore near the café, holding a paper bag against her chest. I called out her name, but she hesitated before turning. Her smile was faint, cautious, not the kind that reached her eyes. "Hey," she said softly. "I was starting to think you vanished," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She looked down, adjusting the strap of her bag. "Just needed a little space." The words stung more than I expected. "From me?" She hesitated. "From this. From how close we were getting." There it was, plain, fragile truth. "I thought that was a good thing," I said quietly. "It was," she admitted. "But people talk. And She stopped, drawing a shaky breath. "I can't afford to be someone's mistake." Her voice trembled on the last word, and it broke something in me. "You're not a mistake," I said. "You never could be." She smiled then, a sad, beautiful kind of smile. You don't see what I see when I look at us. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain again. She looked tired, not in a physical way, but in that quiet, emotional kind of tired that comes from fighting feelings you wish you didn't have. I like who I am when I'm with you, she said softly. But it's confusing. You make me forget the rules I built for myself. I wanted to tell her that maybe rules were meant to bend when something real came along. But the way her eyes glistened, a warning, a plea, told me to stop. So I nodded instead. If space is what you need, I'll give it. She touched my hand lightly, a touch that felt like both a thank you and a goodbye. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. You didn't, I lied. As I walked away, her voice echoed faintly behind me, that familiar softness breaking one last time. Take care, sweetheart. It was the last time she said it, and the first time it truly hurt to hear. The silence between us grew longer than I wanted to admit, a kind of quiet that didn't just fill the air, it filled the days. I tried to move on with routine, classes, errands, work. But everything I did carried traces of her. The smell of coffee reminded me of her laugh. The porch paint on my old shirt reminded me of her hand brushing mine. Even her voice, that soft, teasing tone, echoed in my head when the world got too still. I didn't plan to see her again. I told myself that some stories weren't meant to finish, that maybe this was just one of them. But life has a strange way of bringing people back when words are still unfinished. It happened on a rainy afternoon. I ducked into the café for shelter, the same one where we first sat together. The place was half empty, fog on the windows, soft piano music playing in the background. And there she was, standing near the counter, no umbrella, rain clinging to her hair and jacket. She looked older somehow, not in years, but in emotion. Tired but still graceful. For a second, either of us moved. Then she gave a small smile, that same familiar softness that once felt like home. Seems like the rain still likes to find us, she said. I walked closer, unsure if I should speak or stay silent. It's been a while, I said. She nodded, her eyes searching mine. I didn't mean for it to be. We sat at a corner table. The conversation started small, weather, work, small apologies disguised as casual talk. But underneath it all, emotion trembled like a held breath. Finally, I said what had been sitting inside me for too long. I miss you. She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. I miss you too. More than I wanted to. The words hung between us, delicate but heavy. I thought distance would make it easier. She continued. But all it did was remind me how much I wanted to be near you. Her honesty stunned me. I reached out, instinctively, and my hand brushed hers on the table. This time, she didn't pull away. You don't have to call me sweetheart anymore, I said quietly, my voice unsteady. She looked up, eyes glistening with something I couldn't name. Then, almost in a whisper, she replied, I don't want to stop. The world seemed to pause around us, the sound of rain outside, the distant chatter fading to nothing. She reached out, resting her hand against my chest, feeling my heartbeat beneath her palm. Her touch wasn't hesitant this time. It was steady, a silent confession in itself. I'm tired of pretending I don't care, she said softly. I took her hand in mine. Then don't. For a long moment, we just sat there, close enough to feel each other breathe, far enough to still call it restraint. No grand declarations. No dramatic promises. Just two people, finally honest in the quiet way only they could be. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away everything but the truth. The weeks that followed felt different, not dramatic, not like a movie ending, but peaceful in a way that felt real. Whatever had been fragile between us before now felt calm, steady. We didn't talk about what we were, we just were. She started inviting me over again, though now the air between us carried something quieter, something understood. I'd help her with errands, little things around the house, or sometimes we'd just sit on her porch in the evenings, the same porch we painted together months before. There were no more stolen glances or half-swallowed words. Just presence, simple and warm. She'd pour tea while I read something aloud, or she'd hum softly to the radio while I fixed a loose hinge or changed a light bulb. It all felt beautifully ordinary. Once, as I was leaving, she stopped me at the door and said, "You've brought a bit of peace into my life." I didn't know how to respond at first. I just smiled and said, "You've done the same for me." Sometimes, we still talked about that night in the café, the rain, the silence, the moment we finally stopped pretending. She admitted, "I was terrified that day. Not of you, but of what it meant to feel something again." I told her the truth. "It's the same for me. But I think the hardest part wasn't falling, it was believing I was allowed to." She looked at me for a long moment, then reached up to brush a strand of hair from my forehead. "Maybe that's what love really is," she said softly. "Giving yourself permission to feel it." There was something healing about the way she said it, not as a confession, but as a gentle acceptance. We didn't rush anything. Some days I'd stop by just to check in, and we'd share quiet laughter over something small, a movie, a recipe gone wrong, a memory from years ago. Other days we'd say nothing at all, just sit side by side, letting the silence speak for us. When she called me sweetheart now, it didn't make my heart race the way it used to. It wasn't a spark anymore, it was warmth. Familiar, grounding, real. I think what we found wasn't a perfect romance. It wasn't something that fit into neat labels or timelines. It was two people who found a strange kind of solace in each other's company, a connection born from kindness, honesty, and the courage to stay when it mattered. One evening, as the sun melted into gold and the air filled with that soft, endless quiet, she leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. "I used to think affection was dangerous," she whispered. "But maybe the real danger was never letting myself feel it again." I smiled, my hand resting over hers. "Then I'm glad you did." And for a long while, we just sat there, two people, different in age but alike in heart, wrapped in the peace of something that didn't need to be defined to be true.